Kyle went dark woke 2.0.
I don't agree with all of it, but I do understand the logic to what Trump is doing here. Do you?
No, because we don't have a right to act like this around the world. We're supposed to be a nation among nations, not a nation above nations. And they used to at least lie to us in the past and say that this is good for the world and we're spreading freedom and democracy. Now they don't even bother to lie. Now it's naked, rank, disgusting imperialism where they say, we're going to take the oil. And the point is that we're going to take the oil. We're going to take the minerals. We're going to take the precious metals. We're doing this for our corporations. We're doing it for the Epstein class, the billionaires. And this, to piggyback on what Dave Smith said, is frankly not what many of the MAGA voters thought they were signing up for. They thought America first actually meant America first. By the way, you also replaced the Maduro regime with the Maduro regime. Congratulations on that. It's also...
Well, efficiency. It took 20 years and $6 trillion to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. At least this time around, it was a one-day operation and, you know, maybe a couple $100 million. One-day operation, couple $100 million, replace the Maduro regime with the Maduro regime. I think that's progress. I think that's progress if you think about it.
Been now a week straight of pro-regime protests. Now you have roving gangs of Venezuelan militias that are kidnapping Americans. But again, I come back to the fundamental point, which is...
See, he doesn't... See, this is the limitation. Even with our boy Kyle, who is now coming on board with, re-education camps. So that's wonderful. But like roving gangs of Maduro fans or the Chavistas that are armed, going door to door looking for pro-American sentiment. That's my dream. Okay. And ironically enough, I joked about saying like, this is the future Kamala Harris wants, because they were saying like the collectivos were looking for Trump supporters, going door to door looking for Trump supporters to arrest and apprehend. And I was like, fuck yeah. Okay. That's awesome. I love that. And so many liberals got mad at me for that one. They got so mad. Give it a couple years. Give it like one more year. Okay. Give it one more year until the radical white woman vanguard comes on board when they say, arm us, please. Arm us. We will be your Fedayeen. We will go door to door with weapons to make sure that everyone is sufficiently pro-woke. Okay. Armed woke Sharia. The IRGC, but for woke. Okay. A parallel security apparatus designed exclusively around the boundaries of empathy and putting the working class first. One can only dream.
If you sign on to stuff like this, you're saying might makes right and the law of the jungle is back. What you're saying is China has a right to go into whatever smaller country they want and depose the leader and say we're doing it because we can and we have the right to do it and we have bigger guns and there's nothing you can do to stop it. So they're never going to address that fundamental question, which is why do we have a right? Do we actually believe in international law, or was that all a joke? Are we rolling the clock back to the 1700s and the 1800s, and we're going super...
Guys, if we do authoritarian socialism one more time, it will work. Just please, one more Vanguard party. Listen, silence, anarchist. Okay? You got the French Commune for like 3.5 seconds, and you're over here talking shit, okay? At least authoritarian socialism has numbers on the board. Okay, it worked. It worked in certain countries. Let's be real. Yes, it failed after an extended period of time. But let's be real for a second.
Primitive style here, and I think the answer to that is yes. They want to go super primitive style.
International law goes back to antiquity. It's not some creation of modernity, whether we're talking about the 1700s or the 20th century.
The Geneva Conventions, the Nuremberg Tribunal, the Geneva Conventions and the Nuremberg Tribunal?
Yes, those exist, but international laws, the jus gentium goes back to antiquity. However, unfortunately, a lot of our liberal friends think history began a few decades ago.
The League of Nations was useless. It fell apart, and that's why we had the UN. That's why we had the Geneva Convention.
Right, I'm talking about millennia ago,
because we looked at piles of millions of dead bodies, and we said that's a bad idea. We looked at piles of millions of dead bodies and said, that's a bad idea. Let's not do that anymore. Let's actually have a framework and rules and laws. And Trump is blowing that up. By the way, He bombed fishing boats from Venezuela, Trinidad, and Tobago, and Colombia. He just did the regime change in Venezuela. He bombed Yemen and Somalia and Nigeria and Iran. He's threatening Greenland and Panama and Canada and Cuba and Mexico. And you sit there the whole time and act like it's okay. Is there anything Trump could do, Michael Knowles, that you would say, I condemn it, and you hop off the Trump train, or are you going to tickle his taint for the rest of your fucking life?
Tickle his taint. He didn't like that. Look at his face. He went from smiling to not smiling.
Panama, Canada, and Cuba and Mexico. And you sit there the whole time and act like it's okay. Is there anything Trump could do, Michael Knowles, that you would say, I condemn it, and you hop off the Trump train, or are you going to tickle his taint for the rest of your fucking life?
No, there have been plenty of Trump policies.
Dark woke commander. Antifa. Tickle his taint.
That I've criticized because he's only right about 99.78% of the time. So the First Step Act I thought was a misstep. But I would say the rest. Excuse me. I would say the rest of the
Oh my God, he did blowjob noises. Are you fucking serious? Ain't no way. He said you're tickling his taint, and he went My history is shit. Which countries do authoritarian socialism work? You talking like USSR? Yes, the USSR was an example of authoritarian socialism, or a vanguard party actually designing, like, good or bad, it existed, right? I'm not writing for every single thing that the USSR did, but it existed. Another example, obviously, is you got Vietnam, China, USSR, Cuba. There are places where DPRK to a certain degree, even though there are some. There's some stuff about the way that they govern themselves that I wouldn't consider to be remotely socialist. But ultimately, when you look at any existing socialist countries, if you consider that to be a level of success, then these are the examples. They were theory turned into practice, turned into existing nation states. And yes, there were a lot of imperfections. There were a lot of problems. And I think it's important to identify those problems and to make sure that you don't repeat those problems. But ultimately, even with global finance capital dominating the entire globe, there is such a concept of transitional socialist states, and many other countries that actually take the socialist example, or socialization, or nationalization, and factor it in to their economic production to survive. That's why you have social democracies that are capitalist in nature and yet still have higher degrees of socialization, public ownership over, entire sectors, if not entire industries. Like Norway, one example is Norway, where the entirety of the extraction is nationalized, from the forests all the way to oil and gas. So Clearly it can work. It does work. A lot of people forget that it works, or have no understanding of how it worked for the time period that it did work. I just think there's so much that's possible, and we got to set our sights higher. I'm not trying to derail us all. Love anarchism in myriad forms has existed for much longer than the disease of empire the world over. Yeah, disease is right. Disease is also another thing that existed for a very long time. Do with that information what you will. Listen, I read Kropotkin, I read some anarchist works. It pains me to say it now, but Noam Chomsky is a good read for a lot of different things. Let's say he's not so great in his later work, being Jeffrey Epstein's best friend, but I am quite familiar with your man's. By the way, chill on that. We tried a thing with everything stacked against it a few times, and there were some problems, so let's just stick with the thing we know doesn't work for perpetuity. Noam Chomsky, calm down, dude. Fuck. He's like 150 years old, okay?
Administration has been very successful. What's your problem? What's
my
your
problem?
criticism?
Is that you're a cuck, and you're a hack, and you're not an independent thinker, and you're meat riding Trump.
Why do you say
know that what he's doing in imperialism, and you don't care.
I just answered your question. I corrected
Congratulations. You rented your brain to a war criminal, pedophile, rapist. I hope you're happy.
A war criminal, pedophile, rapist? You brought up a point. You brought up international law, and you made a very...
said, did I stutter? Whoo!
False point, a dumb point, which is that international law began only a few hundred years ago. I corrected you, and I pointed out that the international law is part of the Western tradition. Excuse me one second. It goes back to antiquity. It's a principle of the jus gentium. And then you said, well, international law has failed because of the League of Nations failure, which I think is actually undermining your argument and proving my point and proving Trump's point, because the liberal internationalism that was established by people like Woodrow Wilson did, in fact, fail, which is why we need to restore an...
That's so dumb. This is where libs actually win the argument over fucking dumbass Republicans. Because how can you say the liberal international order failed when it literally caused the greatest American prosperity of all time? It was fake. It's fake. It's still might is right, you dumb fuck. The only difference is you were telling a lie to people and you were soothing the masses with the notion that Americans were there to help, okay? It was a much more efficient and much better manicured way of doing colonial domination without making people even realize that they were getting fucked. And the people that realized they were getting fucked, you could just kill them and depose them and kidnap them and implement puppet states in their stead. Okay? And the ones who were talking in the masses were voiceless anyway because they were black and brown for the most part. So in that regard, if you believe in might is right, ironically enough, the liberal internationalist perspective, the NATO Atlanticists, are actually far better at making sure that there is a resilient, domineering system of enforcement than whatever kind of dumb shit Trump is doing right now. Because authoritarianism, let's get back to the domestic level. Authoritarianism exists in every form of governance, okay? The government is supposed to reassert its authority. That's just what the government does, okay? We establish rules in order to make sure that there is there's a social cohesion, okay? We establish best practices and best rules that we could possibly design, okay? And then the government says, I am going to have the authority, I have the monopoly of violence as the state, and I'm going to enforce these rules, okay? When you think about it from the domestic level, authoritarian governments that are more authoritarian than like neoliberal governments are in their mechanism of control actually have to be much more, actually have to listen to their base of support because there's no pressure valve in the form of a democratic process where you vote for someone, right? So you have to be you have to put your ear to the ground. You have to listen to all of the minutia, all the demands that your public is making. Otherwise, there will be a rebellion. One example of this is the IRGC. Doesn't listen to the demands that the masses are making. And then you have hundreds of people that are, thousands of people that are taken up to the streets with arms and they're shooting at the fucking security officers. And then you're killing 2,000 people, 3,000 people, right? That's what happens when you are a more authoritarian country, okay? And the same goes for the international order. If you actually maintain a system that makes it seem as though other countries are sovereign, while you're the one who's fucking dominating them through these covert initiatives, whether it be NATO or whether it be the IMF or World Bank, then even if countries actually get upset or get offended, you can still lie to them and say, oh, you just didn't try hard enough. Oh, you just have inefficiencies in your developmentary process. And that's the reason why you haven't been able to control your own resources or control your own destiny and maintain sovereignty. When you run around saying, we got the biggest dick, eat our cock right now. We got the biggest dick. I want your oil. I'm going to fuck your oil with my dick. My dick is so hard. I'm going to fuck the oil right now. There's no more argument. There's no more marketing. There's no more lying about a less authoritarian mechanism of control. This was the success of liberalism. And now that the endless greed due to capitalism is worsening the contradictions, and liberalism is failing because liberals are the defenders of capitalism around the globe, Trump is moving into the old 17th century siege mentality, okay? And saying, nope, we're just taking it. It's mine. I'm going to fucking take it. It doesn't matter. Well, now that there's no more argument as to why, America is dominating all these countries for anything but resources, what do you think those countries are going to think? How do you think they're going to design their defenses? Okay? Eventually, people are only going to take it for so long until they fight back. So, in that regard, I think, ironically enough, the liberal version was infinitely more successful than what is coming next. Because what's coming next right now, what's happening in front of our eyes, is something that was tried before. It's fascism. Okay? It's a much more open way of doing capitalist extraction of natural resources, imperialism, and exploitation. And when you do it like that through violent means, well, there's a bandwidth for that. You know what I mean? There's only you can only go the violent way with hard power for so long. Eventually, people are going to realize that they're getting fucked over, and they're going to take up arms against you. That's why I always say America has 800 military bases around the planet that we know of, but that devoid of the soft power initiatives turns into 800 different military occupations. And no country on the planet, even with all of our technological superiority now, as opposed to, colonial superpowers of the past, has the capacity to do 800 wars in real time. No country can keep up 800 invasions in real time. America is not that country. No country has ever existed that can do that. If England blew a 13 colony lead, America can blow it too. And America is blowing it.
Older and more classical conception of the international order, which is precisely what Trump's doing. So I think you've hoisted yourself with your own petard. And then you just make a lot of vulgar sort of non sequiturs because you don't have a leg to stand on.
All right, let me bring in...
Let me ask you this question.
Hang on,
Piers, let me ask him a question real quick. Tell me the name of the Minister of Defense in Venezuela.
I don't know. Whatever his name is.
Well, and that's the
Garcia
problem, is that you're
Rodriguez
advocating for a regime change. You don't know the first thing.
I didn't. I just said the opposite. I argued against a regime change.
He actually said the opposite.
I
heard Michael
Knowles. I just want to correct something.
Michael Knowles say the regime remains there, right? So he said the opposite, in fact. I want to bring in Coleman.
No, but he wanted to take out Maduro. Don't give me that cutesy little BS.
Yes, but he made the point that the regime is still... He made the point the regime is still there, and the vice president appears to be much more compliant with running...
So was Maduro, by the way. So I don't even fully understand why they wanted to do this.
Venezuela the way America would prefer for its national security than Maduro. So that's what Michael said. He didn't advocate regime change. Let me bring in Coleman Hughes. Coleman,
kidnapping the president.